Good morning. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. I'm joined by Ken Jenkins, Deputy County Executive. Today is a day that's going to test us. The testing hasn't really begun yet, but we're seeing a situation where we still have a number of Westchester residents without power and an incoming snowstorm that by a variety of estimates may go as high as 12 inches in various parts of the county. And we will have to respond to the snowstorm in the same fashion that we will be dealing with the residual difficulties of people who are without power. The most recent statistics that we have at our availability is that the NYSEG service on electric has current outages of 1,516 customers. That's down dramatically from where we were yesterday, much less a few days ago. We have a NYSEG representative that is at the County Emergency Operations Center in Hawthorne, which is where we're going to be a little later this morning and then for the balance of the day. Con Edison reports now that the number of customers that are out are 9,911, and that's down dramatically from the numbers we've had. We had numbers in the middle of the night or before the middle of the night last night that was in the vicinity of 19,000 customers. So they've made progress according to their numbers, and they too will have a representative at the county EOC. Now, there was a phrase that President Reagan used once when he was talking about dealing with the Russians, and he used the phrase, "Dovernai no provenai," trust but verify. So we trust these numbers, but we want to verify these numbers. And so we're making an active effort to talk to town supervisors, DPW officials, city officials, all across the service area to find out what is still out of service and what is back in service. We've heard that Heritage Hills in Somers, which is a huge complex of folks 55 years and older, is back on power, which is very good news for the people in that area. They've suffered quite a bit to this point. And there are certain neighborhoods that have been out for a while and now they're back. But we want to be sure that these numbers are accurate. There have been errors in communications from the various utility companies. We have heard that individuals have called us saying they've gotten robocalls from their various utility companies saying that they have service back when in fact they did not, or they had it back for a while and it canceled. So anecdotes might be included in the amount of outages that are still here. We're not sure. But those are the numbers we have. If they're accurate, they're very encouraging, but we still have people who've been told that they will be out until Friday. And that being the case, we're now on the cusp of a serious snowstorm, which we're going to have to join forces with all the other local DPW. They do the bulk of the snow removal in this county in order to make sure that the roads are cleared. And we do expect that a heavy water content snowstorm will affect existing power that's in place and will put other places out. So we're going to have to monitor that as the day goes along, and that's what we hope to do up at the EOC. At present, the Westchester County Airport is open, and the usual application applies. Call ahead, check your carrier, because there are cancellations by the score at all our major airports. The weather conditions outside now are just beginning to reflect what's coming, so anybody who is looking outside now will see a much better situation than they're going to see later in the day. So they should make the assumption, call ahead, and deal with the airport accordingly. The Beeline bus system is running, but we reserve the right to make modifications to routes and ultimately to cut the service if it becomes problematic. There are certain steep areas and inclines. I've mentioned already Nodine Hill and Yonkers, where we have an established snow route, which we will apply as the weather conditions require. The people who use the system regularly are familiar with this, and hopefully that will be a factor. We're responsible for the clearing of the Bronx River Parkway, and then we work in concert with the other local DPWs to do the job of snow removal in those areas. The County Emergency Management Center in Hawthorne is open. As I said, we all plan to be there to interact with the other agencies in the state of New York. States of emergency are still in effect here in Westchester County. We've maintained the order that we put in place on Sunday. We expect to maintain it through the duration of the snowstorm and perhaps until we have confidence after the snowstorm that power has been restored everywhere. Locally, there are states of emergencies in the town of Cortland, the town of North Salem, and the town of Somers. And of course, New York State's order still applies for multiple county regions that Governor Cuomo has put into place. And the governor will have statements, no doubt, in the future to make about some of the major roadways and whether they'll remain open or limited in any kind of a fashion. There are warming centers and charging centers. There's multiple ones across the county. We have opened one at the Westchester County Center. Last night, it was open until 10 p.m. At the time that it closed, there was no one there. So we understand that it's a service available for individuals. Whether they can use it or choose to use it is their option. but it's part of our response to try to make it possible for somebody if that's the case. And there are local ones. I've been to quite a number of them. Ken has been to quite a number of them. They vary in terms of the number of response. As the number of people are back on power, then the universe of people that need the centers are much less. But we'll see what happens as this storm goes through the county. By the way, if you want to find out any of the information relative to the utility web pages, you can go on our website at westchestergov.com, and you'll find a link to the utility pages. You can go right onto the utility pages and look at it itself. We understand there's a cold weather alert that's being issued, which will deal with forecasted temperatures and wind chills at or below 32 degrees for today and the next few days as the day progresses. Wind chills are expected to remain at or below freezing throughout the day. That's the problem. And high winds will start to go into effect. And we're under the understanding that once winds hit at 30 miles an hour, bucket trucks are not going to go up. So whatever restoration efforts are ongoing now, and there are ongoing now. I was down at Playland this morning to watch all of the out-of-town mutual aid people muster up and go out to deal with more of these restoration projects. The restoration portion will stop when the winds are high enough and the snow deep enough is a problem. So far, we've had no major incidents on our roadways. There is a New York state-imposed truck ban effective on all our interstate highways. Our various Metro North services are having a reduced weekday schedule, but they are running, as we're told, unimpeded. Amtrak has modified their Northeast Regional and Acela Express service. That involves the corridor that includes the stop in New Rochelle, and then the Keystone service that also involves going up and down through New York, through Westchester on the Hudson River side. That involves stops in Yonkers and Croton Harmon. Are also operated on a modified schedule. Touch base with Amtrak accordingly. Most things are shut down. Most businesses took the advance notice to keep their employees off the road. We did the same thing in Westchester County by closing county services to all but the most essential of employees. That is not a common thing that we do in Westchester County or have not done, but we felt it was correct for the safety and health of the individual employees, and we felt it was also important so that our road crews would have that much less of people out on the road. I'm even feeling guilty that I've had our executive team have to come in today as necessary so that we could properly communicate and do our job. But we're concerned about human beings here. That's more important than anything else. And whether the human being is a person without power or a person that has to drive out in this, we prefer that everybody shelter warmly in place, get through the snowstorm, and then go from there. Have I missed anything of any importance? I'll turn to either Catherine Chaffee or any of my other key staff people. Deputy County Executive, any key issues? Then we'll go to questions and try to answer anything that you have. We'll do any individual interviews you'd like to do after this is over. But any general questions you have for what we're aware of at this point?
Why are there such a discrepancy in the numbers that we hear on Con Edison?
Mark, it's hard to know. We had ourselves, gone to the website and saw one set of numbers, and then our EOC gave us a separate set of numbers, and we were mystified by why there was such a great gap. So as I said earlier, we take the assumption that until we can independently verify it, we report the numbers that we're given. They are told to us to be accurate, so we share them with you under that understanding. But we also have contact out in the field. Anybody who follows my personal Twitter and Facebook pages, I asked that question earlier today. I said, please let me know, do you have power or not? We're told you get 90% restoration, what's the situation where you live? And of course, that generally elicits the people who don't have power. The people that do have power, they're past this now, and they're ready to dig out of the snowstorm. So I don't know what the discrepancy is, and I think when there's the after-the-fact review that's coming, both through the PSC, the Board of Legislators have indicated they're going to have some hearings, and we're certainly going to have some meetings on the topic, not only of the preparation issue and the response issue, but the communications issue. Because one of the things that makes things worse is when we, and the royal we, all of us in any kind of a position of authority, fail to communicate accurately and transparently. And the number of people that have said they have gotten, just as you asked in your question, inaccurate information, sometimes to their benefit, saying, we'll restore your power on Friday, power's already back on, that's okay, or it's going to be back on, or it is back on, and it's not. Those are problems in the communication system that the utility companies have to address. Yes, Tara.
NYSEG and Con Ed obviously have been largely criticized for not being as prepared as they should have been for Friday's storm. Talk about insult to injury. Do you think they're better prepared to handle today's storm than they were on Friday?
Well, what I suspect is they're better prepared today because they've just been through a crucible, and they understand that, forget government, Westchester residents, and I would say beyond just Westchester residents, Hudson Valley residents, they're watching very carefully what their utility companies are doing. And many times the elected officials of every level of government, from the governor on down, respond to community outrage, and the communities are outraged. Even people who have their power back, they're looking at a situation which didn't have to go on this long, could have been dealt with sooner, and that's the motivation and the anger that the utilities will have to deal with. It'll be manifest through these questions and surveys and testimony and hearings, but it's that core anger, Tara, and you experience, as you go out, I mean, you're a person out in the community, you talk to people in one-on-one situations, you hear how they feel about this. So we're just reflecting in our public comments exactly what we've heard out there, and the lack of confidence in the way the utilities responded the first time makes everybody doubtful. I believe they're ready for this time through because they've gone through this bad experience, but we'll see. And there's no question in my mind that let's say we are in fact at 90% service right now. That's going to go backwards with this storm. It's inevitable that we're going to have snow situations, wind situations. Some of the fixes out there were temporary, where you saw something that needed a structural fix and you couldn't do that, but you did something temporary to get the power back on. And high winds, heavy snow could undo the temporary fix and require you to go back in. So we're not out of the woods by far. And we're just going to have to watch it and monitor it. And that's what we intend to do over the next 24, 48, 72 hours.
How many Westchester customers are out at this time? At 8:30 a.m., they said it was 18,000.
John, according to the numbers we have here, which I think were accurate as of the top of the hour, we have 1,516 NYSEG outages, customer outages, and 9,911 Con Edison. So if you aggregate the two, for the sake of the county, you're at 11,400 some odd customers, and customers may not be individuals. Obviously, multiple people are affected by that. There may be some group entities that are identified as customers. But with that thought in mind, that number is projected to us as being in the vicinity of 10% of the total customer base. But that's the numbers we have now. And as I said, we hope they're accurate compared to them being inaccurate on the error on the side of there being more. And we are going to try as best as we can to identify whether that's accurate.
Means their up-to-date website that's updated every 15 minutes is slightly out of date.
We went through that. We went through this very challenge this morning, trying to rationalize a couple of set of different numbers, and it can be frustrating. Because, and look, I'm sure the people who are doing the website, they have to get information fed back to them from the field. But the bottom line is that's what we're going to work on today to try to determine if we know exactly where we are. Because if we don't know exactly what the gross numbers are, how are we going to know the individual situations? And that's really what this story is about. This story is about a woman who has a child right now or a senior citizen father in a home somewhere in this county that's cold. She's not a statistic. She's a human being.
How do you know that your numbers...
I'm sorry, say it again.
When they do the repairs, they take other people down, so that's why the numbers fluctuate.
Okay. Ken has just advised me that when they make certain repairs, they have to shut down loops for periods of time. And so there are people that have service that go out of service before they're reestablished on a larger basis. I'm sorry, sir.
What I was saying is, how do you know that your numbers are right and that Con Edison's numbers are wrong?
The numbers that we have here came from the county emergency operations center. We have people who are on duty at the desk that have verified information from the Con Edison and NYSEG people who were there. I mentioned that if you've been to the emergency operations center, it looks like a big call center, telemarketing call center with cubicles and phones for different entities. So there's a Con Edison and a NYSEG person there. Their information is that they have and they give us is put into these reports. And what we're noting is that what we have on a website may not agree with this information which we were given directly. And I've said that I can't personally stand by these numbers. I'm reporting what we've been given as the accurate numbers. And, I hope that we're giving accurate numbers. But, we've also had the utility companies make projections that said things would be done by the end of Monday, the end of Tuesday, and those things have been pushed beyond because those estimates were inaccurate.
So you're not 100% about those?
No, of course not. Of course not. And I think I've said that.
Did Con Ed work all night? They didn't suspend the...
Well, I can only tell you what I saw as I was driving around. I saw Con Ed crews. I was in the Con Ed section of the county, and I was out until almost midnight, and I saw Con Ed crews working in certain locations. How much of that all night, I can't tell you. And I can tell you this morning when I did my spin down to Playland, which is in the general neighborhood that I live in, I saw many of the out-of-town crews that had the engines running and were prepared to go back out, and they started to be deployed back out. So there was restoration programs prepared. Tara?
Do we have a sense of the total number of trees that were knocked down on Friday's storm? And also right now, we know Yorktown was the ground zero right from Friday. What part of the county do you think is most vulnerable?
Well, initially, I mean, Yorktown, Somers, and that ridge over to Pound Ridge, or that area over to Pound Ridge was seen as the worst hit part. North Salem maintains, and Cortland maintains their states of emergency along with Somers. So, of course, that's the northern tier of the county. So I would make the assumption they were the worst hit. But this was not a regional hit in Westchester County, as you know. You saw people in Pelham and Larchmont in the beginning of the storm that were knocked out. Downtown Larchmont was out, no power in the core parts of downtown Larchmont. Ditto Pelham, ditto sections of Yonkers. Tom Meyer came on your station and talked about the difficulties Yonkers was having. So there were areas who were hit worse, but everybody was hit at some level. And whoever it is that lives in a particular area, when a tree goes down and it takes out a wire, it can affect a certain number of houses. It may not affect other houses in the neighborhood. So the macro view is the area is good, but there's a bad street or two, and that bad street or two, if they're not addressed, as far as they're concerned, they're out of power and they're unhappy about it. So it's a funny situation in that regard, because we are accustomed to hurricane-related outages, and hurricanes have a certain path, and they don't hit the county equally. The hurricane might come up the coast and affect the Sound Shore communities, or might come in from the west and cut a swath across the county. You could be 10 miles away from the swath unaffected. This hit everywhere, and I think that was one of the reasons that made this so bad, is that the utility companies did not anticipate the scope of it. Now, I don't have a tree number for you of how many were down. I've heard numbers that over 1,000 specific incidents occur, whether an incident is a full tree down or just wires are down. But if you think about that, if you're going to address every one of those circumstances, and you start out, 50, 100 trucks, and you've got 1,000 possible places that have to be restored, you can see the scope of how widespread the problems were. And then, I don't know, I certainly don't know how to deal with high voltage power situations, but I suspect when a professional crew came upon a scene, they could see at any particular scene a complicated set of wiring around, physical impediments, and it would not be simple to undo those things. So the lack of preparedness had a multiplier effect because of the nature of the storm and the nature of the complexity of getting back online.
So are there enough boots on the ground today to keep us safe?
I hope so. I mean, what I see empirically are trucks, bucket trucks, and other types of trucks. That's encouraging. I have no way to correlate what I see to sufficiency to put the remaining 11,000 customers back in service, and then to deal with the expectation that we have, which is more people will go out because of the snowstorm. You may know better than I do the current estimations of when the snow is going to stop. It seems to have started later than was originally projected, which makes me think it will go later. And if it goes later into the night, then I would assume that the cleanup will be in effect overnight tonight into the morning hours tomorrow, and then the restoration is not going to happen until we have some clearing of the roads. If we have downed trees, that'll be a factor. There's so many other factors. You have to get snow out of the way. You don't want to play with high voltage electrical where there's snow around you and water conductivity. There's a lot of things to consider. So, Allie?
Yeah, what do you have to say to those without power who may have been going to the warming centers, but today they're thinking, if I get there, I may get stuck there?
Well, I think one of the problems with folks is that every person's situation is different, so the generic advice comes off sounding like it's just saying it for the effect of saying it and not really meaning it. The most intelligent advice you give anybody right now, given the fact that we're going into a snowstorm, is shelter with a friend, shelter with a neighbor. If somebody in your neighborhood that you have a certain friendship with has a generator, go there. And if you have a generator and you have the ability to have one of your neighbors with you and you know that they're without power, invite them over. This is the moment in which you have to have this kind of Westchester neighborliness. It's, when everybody is different in what they're comfortable with, but the bottom line is we don't have a systematic place in every community for you to go to for overnight shelter. There's also folks, it's just a matter of preference, who don't choose to go to a warming center. They don't feel comfortable in this kind of community center environment. They're sitting in sort of an open room. It's not the comfort of their home. Well, if you don't have power and it's getting colder, it's not wise to sit in a cold house all day long, whether you have overnight accommodations there or not. It makes sense to sit at the Hergen Hand Center in Armonk. It makes sense to sit at the Morabito Center in Cortland or the VFW Hall in Larchmont and Mamaroneck. And if you really don't want to do it, do it. That's what I would say to them. In the meantime, our job is to make sure that as the snow falls, we remove it as fast as we can so you have mobility. You can't afford to be at your home and can't get to the warming center. That's our job, along with all the local DPWs, and make prudent decisions as best as you can. But and you have every right to be angry, but you still have to act off of practical reality right now, and then that anger will have its proper venting in due time. Other questions?
Should we expect any travel restrictions or anything to be imposed by the county today?
Well, the governor generally uses his authority to restrict travel, and because he would do it on a regional basis rather than us doing it on a local basis, we defer to see how the governor may want to handle travel on our interstate system. If he decides to shut down, for the sake of this discussion, 95, 87, 287, then significant travel is going to be restricted. We're going to take a hard look at the Bronx River Parkway. We usually close it oftentimes because of flooding issues, and this certainly could be one of those days where the snow and the water content could cause us to do that, Mark. And then, of course, we're going to deal with what's actually happening in nature. Mother Nature may decide to close any number of roads because of what happens to trees and areas in that area. You'll see that reflected in what we do with our Beeline bus system, because as roads become impassable, if that's what we think is going to happen today, then we shut the Beeline bus system down first, and then we'll deal with what roadways we have control over.
Can you just finally just sum up how dangerous this storm can be and what your final message is to Westchester County residents?
Well, if we're going to deal with a 10, 12-inch snowstorm, mobility is going to be limited. At this moment, as we're having this conversation before the hour of 10, mobility is still possible. So make prudent decisions right now. Don't put it off to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you may not have the option to go from where you are now to some other place. If you're unsure of what's available to you, call your local police department or whatever municipality you live in. They will know if there's a warming center. They'll know what's near and proximate to you. And don't let anything get in the way of making the decisions that's in your personal best interest, because by 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, according to what we understand, we're going to be relatively immobilized by the snow. We'll deal with it professionally, but you may have lost your options and you may be in a cold household for that point in time through the night. And if that's not in your best interest, don't wait until then. Act now.
And don't stay in the car.
Yeah. Oh, and yes, absolutely. Don't use your car as shelter. It's inadequate shelter from the cold. You turn it on, you have the potential of carbon monoxide fumes. You will run out of gas at some point in time. You are more vulnerable to a tree falling and being in danger. A car is not an appropriate place of shelter. You've all been very kind. I'm sure we'll keep giving you updates. We'll be off to the EOC shortly, but we're happy to talk with you at any point in time. If you'd like to talk one-on-one now, fine. If not, whatever you think. Thank you for your service in getting this message out to everybody. We really appreciate that. Have a good day.